A very warm welcome to all. I'm Aarti Kadre, member of WDC KE Ashraf College, welcoming you to the third day of online training program on gender, disaster and sustainable communities, organized in association with National Institute of Disaster Management. Before we start today's program, participants kindly take note of following points. All your questions are welcome. You can put your questions in the chat box, which will be answered during question and answer session. We will put feedback link in the chat box during vote of thanks. Participants who will be attending training program and fill the feedback form, only those will get e-certificates. Feedback link will not be shared on any platform except the Zoom chat box. On the first day, we had two remarkable speakers, Dr. Lavanya Shanbag and Dr. Vibhuti Patel. On the second day, we were privileged to have two eminent speakers, Dr. Geeta Balkrishnan and Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar. Dr. Geeta Balkrishnan, in her discussion on her college experience and how she purposefully conducted various activities to disaster affected women and children. Women's ability to handle traumatic people during the disaster was specifically mentioned by her. Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar very lucidly explained gender responsive budget and its importance for India and the world. With this, we will start today's session. May I now request Mr. Rajkumar Gupta, member of WDC, to introduce our first resource person for the day. Over to you, Rajkumar sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes.
Thank you, madam. I take this opportunity to introduce our today's guest speaker, Dr. Sukriti Chauhan. Madam is an INLEX scholar and a trained lawyer with a master in international development law and human rights from Warwick University, UK. She has close to a decade of advocacy and communication expertise in public health and human rights, working with the highest offices in India, including Honorable President and Prime Minister. Madam has started her career with Path India, working closely on HIV/AIDS, sexual reproductive health, cervical cancer prevention, and maternal and child health. As a director at Global Health Strategies, Madam had led the tuberculosis control and prevention project, resulting in national level policy change, and set up the 50 million fund, $15 million funding pool under the Grand Challenge in Global Health Initiative in India. She continued to work closely with Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, Chief Scientist, World Health Organization on mental health in India. She also spearheaded the curation of 5-year strategy for the Tata Trust India Health Fund focused on tuberculosis and malaria elimination in India. Recently, Madam had been awarded her PhD titled Legal and Social Impact of HIV/AIDS on Abundant Housewives in Kolkata and Delhi from Jawaharlal Nehru University. Madam has widely presented and published her work at the global and national level. We welcome you, Madam. Now I request Ma'am to start the session. Over to you, Ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta, and the pleasure is mine. I'm so happy to be here and to be associated with this. In fact, when you were talking about my profile, I was reminded of my PhD guide, Amita Singh, who's the professor, who's disaster and disaster management is something she's very passionate about. So I just want to thank her for letting me into this space, and it's my pleasure. So before we begin, the PPT, I've put together a few slides, but I think before we begin, I'm sure you heard from other speakers, the real issue remains that women are very much at the front lines of disaster management, but they are not accorded neither the respect, nor the protection, nor the rights that should be given to them. I think there is no denial that they are at the front lines, just like our 300 million strong Anganwadi worker women are. They continue to face the same challenges, and I'm going to use some examples to talk to all of you about that. Of course, questions are welcome, and so is debating. I think knowledge can only grow when we debate. So I'm looking forward to that. Aarti, could you please share my PPT?
Yes. Rajkumar sir.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sharing. Just a minute. Ma'am, my screen is visible.
Yes, it's coming up.
Yeah.
Yes. Could you make it full
Yes,
screen,
yes, yes,
Raj?
yes. Just
Thank
a
you.
minute. Yes, done.
Okay, so on your right side, before we begin the conversation, I just want to talk about, COVID has, of course, been a crisis which humankind has not seen in the last, I don't know how many years. And I don't think we were prepared to respond to it. I think we came together as a world and, we are looking at responses as we grow along. On your right side of the screen is ETI. It's ETI, which stands for Empower, Transform, and Inspire. COVID has been unprecedented in many ways. There's been loss, there's been death, there's been learning. But for me personally, it was a time when I really took a leap and started out on my own. So this is an organization that I've set up in October 2020. Everybody is welcome to go online and see the website. It's called www.etiservices.org. And we want to work with keeping gender at the base of everything that we do. And that's why this conversation really interested me. The topic that we are talking about today is gender, environment, and sustainability in disaster context, ecofeminist perspectives. Next slide, please. So what is the need for an ecofeminist perspective? I started my conversation by talking about how women are impacted by natural disasters in very different ways than men and, just the broader society. And why is it important that we follow not only an ecofeminist perspective, but also club it with an intersectional approach? So when we talk about intersectional approaches, what it basically means is that when we decide to bring in gender in any conversation or any strategy or the way that we are looking at responses, the problem worsens because, there is structural deprivation of women. It has been going on for ages and it continues. Women belonging to probably the lower castes and classes are impacted even more by natural disasters than women belonging to probably upper castes and classes. There are studies on this, there's data available. I'll encourage everybody to also refer to that. That's the exact reason why intersectionality is immensely important and needs to be considered under the ecofeminist approach. Women cannot be treated as a monolith. Their different social circumstances have to be considered in the process of policymaking. So I think that's what I wanted to start with. And, how does caste and class really interact with the differences that we see when it comes to the gender lens? We need it because we need to understand that there is unequal power relations and how do they impact women, especially in natural disasters. And then once we do have that understanding, and of course we are working on it, but even the SDGs deprive women of, that equality of context because, they talk about women accessing land and that's it. Women need so much more than just land. Women need support. We need to understand the differential impacts. Only when we do that, only when we take into account intersectional experiences, can we come up with policies and really assist to change this. Next slide, please. So what are the pre-existing vulnerabilities? And, I put this, infographic from print up because we've been battling to get 33% reservation in Parliament now for more than 2 decades. And it has not worked for us. And until and unless women are in decision-making and leadership positions, I think women will not have the rights that we want them to have. We will not be able to address these issues. So while women are at the front lines, there's hardly any decision they make. For example, what happens to say something as basic as I'm trying to just remember the examples. There was one that, all the economic decisions are taken by the men of the household. Women definitely don't have a say where the money goes and how it goes. And until and unless you have women at the central of decision-making mechanisms, they will not be prioritized. We've seen this globally, and this is exactly where it needs to change, all the way from the panchayat level to the parliament in India. The second point on your screen, as you can see, is unequal access to resources. I just brought the point up of finances. Until and unless women are included in financial decision making, until and unless they have access to, making themselves independent, we will not see this change. Women need to have access to resources. It impacts their autonomy, it impacts their decision-making power. And since resources such as land and money, I spoke about both to you right now, culturally, politically, societally, it's not taken seriously. And it's not considered to be something a woman should have. So I think there's an urgent need to change it. In my personal experience, and it's anecdotal, Raj brought up the Grand Challenges India campaigns that I've run. I have evidence that when women are given money in their hands, you see homes run better. And there is enough data available for that. What we need to do is take those active measures to encourage our women to be independent, especially in natural disaster situations. Third is social and cultural norms. And we all read about it, we understand about it, but women continue to exist in environments where violence, both physical, mental, emotional, continues to happen to them, at various levels, be it from their husband, be it from their families, be it from their own homes, be it from their children. But, when it comes to natural disaster, women who have survived natural disasters have also been forced with the double burden of overcoming obstacles. They are supposed to deconstruct, they are supposed to respond to violence, they are supposed to deal with poverty. So I think there's a multi-pronged impact that happens on women. Next, please. We come to natural disasters. We've spoken a little bit broadly about what are the three key pillars, which I touched upon in the slides previously. But the impact of natural disasters on women, biological, psychological, social, and post-disaster. Biological, because we do know that women have lower life expectancy when it comes to a comparison with men, and natural hazards and the subsequent impact kill women more than men, and also at younger ages. Psychological, and when it comes to the concept of mental health. Mental health is something that we don't talk about in this country. And that's something that I am going to be working on very, very seriously, especially when it comes to adolescent and young people and women. I think the psychological impact of something like a natural disaster sits very deep. And women are prone to depression. They are somehow supposed to just carry on with their lives, do the regular duties, and in exchange, they get no support for the trauma of whether it's losing their life savings, whether it's losing their loved ones. I think it's time that we start looking at that perspective and addressing it. It has to be part of conversations, it has to be part of policies, and it has to be part of programs. Social, because when they lose their husbands, for example, they have to suddenly become red earners. So for their entire lives, they didn't have to do that, and they were not even encouraged to do that. But now suddenly they find themselves as the protectors. And I can tell you that I work with women very closely in all communities, and it's a very difficult shift to make without support. And I think we just say that, fine, if this has happened, you've lost your husband in an earthquake, just buckle up and do it. It can lead to severe emotional stress. It can lead to multiple other things that a woman's body, a woman's mind, psychologically also goes through. Post-disaster is, of course, we know of cases where vulnerabilities have gone up. Women have been trafficked. Women are forced to indulge in sex work. So I think that impact, of course, we all know, we read about. There are examples, whether it was the Kashmir earthquake or it was a tsunami. That was definitely something that happened. Next slide. Case studies, I just touched upon tsunami, and one of the biggest traumas to happen to human civilization. I think tsunami just not only killed so many people, but please remember that 80% of those fatalities were women. And among the women who died were widows, single, disabled women, women with low income, marginalized, or from a backward cultural group. But 80% is a huge number, and that data is correct, and it should shock us. There was something as basic as women could not run as fast as men. They could not hang on to trees as long as men could, because physically they are more vulnerable. But I think remember this figure, and as you proceed with your studies, with your research, with your writing, this is the impact that natural disasters have on women. Next. I brought up the Kashmir earthquake because I actually studied it. I was helping with NGOs that were stepping into Kashmir to assist myself. I know that there were women trafficked by thousands. Anybody who survived for survival, either that happened or their families were killed, or they had nowhere else to go. And you can see the impact of natural disasters, something like a Kashmir earthquake. Anyway, is an area riddled with issues, right? So it not only brought up the gender barriers, it heightened them. There was personal insecurity that women felt. Their reproductive needs, from contraception to something as basic as menstrual pads, was not being met. There was, of course, inadequate sanitation facilities. There was no hygiene available for women. And imagine how difficult that can be. When we have periods, I have access to my own bathroom. I have access to pads. I have access to a clean latrine. Women did not have that, and women do not have that generally, and it just gets accentuated when you are faced with a natural disaster. Next, please. So the way forward, and I had a little less time today, but the team has been very understanding. So I'll touch upon each point, and your questions are welcome after that. The way forward, according to me, is that you can only address an issue when you know the depth of the problem. And just having data is not going to help us. I think we need to have comprehensive studies, and this is something that I'd like to assist the Institute with. If you ever come up with a design or a research that you'd like to implement, let's first understand how deep this runs. And let's get some understanding from the ground, from the women, from the collectives, and only then we can frame those responses. Another very important thing is, I think we have a very bad habit of preaching to people. And I don't think natural disasters and its impact on women can be resolved if we don't hear from the women themselves. I think it's high time that women tell us what is it that they need, what is it that they go through. And we need to draft those policies and those changes and those shifts working with them. They have to be part of this narrative and this journey. That's the only way we will find a solution, and I'm certain about that. Then the second is prioritizing, obviously, orphans and widows. Of course, there are vulnerable communities in every natural disaster, but anybody who's more vulnerable than the other, and who will be more vulnerable than children, or the young women who are widowed, or the women who are just opened up to sex slavery or human trafficking. So I think we need to prioritize those women also in the realm of natural disasters. Third is, post-disaster is something I don't think that we've done the kind of work that we need to do. I think we need stronger interventions. I think disasters will unfortunately continue to happen. The way we are playing with the climate, I think we are setting ourselves up against something that's very, very scary. We all saw the cloudburst that happened in Dharamshala, and it just swept everything away. And these things will keep happening. In fact, today I was watching on Twitter that there's a German hospital which is flooded, and it has COVID patients currently in it. And that's not because a tub burst. It's because of climate change and us playing havoc with nature. So I think post-disaster aid becomes very important in this, and donors need to come together. They need to understand and prioritize. I think the only way they can understand is through researchers like you, who will come up with these studies and then see how you can pitch it further. The fourth is gender is not a big part of disaster management programs. Gender isn't a big part of a lot of programs, and we know that. Tokenism of using the word gender has to stop. I'm just being very blunt about it. I feel very strongly for it, and that's why I'm being blunt. I think just placing the word gender is not going to help us change anything. I think it's time that we really move away from it and start understanding how tokenistic we actually are. And if you really want to respond to disaster management using programs and you don't focus on the vulnerable women, you're never actually going to find a way out of this. The fifth and the last point that I want to talk about is, access to facilities has to be continuous. mental well-being has to be taken into perspective. I'll give you an example of COVID-19. COVID-19 struck, supply chains broke down. There were women after women and young girls left without basic healthcare. They had no reproductive choices. They had no contraception. They had no menstrual pads. Whatever we have done in the last 20 years, when it comes to gender and health, we are at the brink of undoing all of that. Child marriages have gone up by hordes, and I think this is something we need to really seriously think about. Healthcare cannot be interrupted no matter what the situation. It's a basic human right. So I'm going to stop here and happy to respond to any questions, and we can stop the PPT, Raj.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for such a wonderful session. Participants, I feel it is very much explanatory that there are questions, but participants, you can ask your questions. Ma'am, can you tell us about your startup that you have started?
Sure. So it was something I wanted to do for a very long time, and it's not easy to be on one's own. So I think it's a big, scary step, but I'm so glad and I'm proud that I took that step. And I'm happy to also share details of it with you. But ETI basically is an organization that's come together to respond to health and wellness needs of the most vulnerable and marginalized. It's been actually the founder of ETI is one of the leading scientists in the country. And when you go to the website, you'll see that. So we bring together science, development, advocacy on 5 key issues. One is non-communicable and communicable diseases. The second is mental health. Third is adolescent health and creating safe spaces for young students, for adolescents to really come out and have the opportunity to get assistance. And the fourth is woman empowerment. And through this, research will be the backbone. We are new, but we are very grateful to our collaborators, which includes Rockefeller Foundation that has come into India. There's also other organizations, some of them are based internationally. We are doing some very good work, especially around mental health. I don't know if I had shared the link for the webinar that I'm doing next, which starts at about 3:45. And that's on basically adolescent mental health, where we are going to look at COVID-19, its impact on students, what are their real worries. So if I know that you have a session going on, so we'll be happy to share with you some of those details.
We will like to see the recordings, ma'am, definitely.
We'll send it to you, no problem.
Ma'am, there are 2 questions. One is from the Siddharth 3. It is, how can we integrate gender in disaster management effectively?
Sorry?
How can we integrate, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. How can we integrate gender in disaster management effectively?
So gender can only be integrated in disaster management effectively when you look at it as something unique. We keep saying that it's part of, the part and parcel of this conversation. It's not. It needs to be something independent that is thought very, very seriously. And the other way to really integrate is that have the women tell you what do they need. I spoke about this on the last slide. Don't try and dictate and change gender norms just because we are empowered and we think that we can do that. The real power lies in the community. The real power lies with the women who have gone through this and continue to go through it. And they are the ones who need to tell us how we are going to do this.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, second question is, what about disabled women? Ma'am, during disaster situation, because they will be needing extra attention due to double disadvantages.
I completely agree. And I think when we do this gender-based programming to respond to natural disasters, I actually think disabled women need to be a very separate and special category. I think not only they have the dual challenges, I think is just more pronounced on them. Disability by itself in India is an issue that has been long ignored. So you can only imagine what happens to them in a natural disaster situation. That's why centers, healthcare needs need to be met, and there has to be a very acute amount of attention on disabled women who are going through that.
Ma'am, there is one question from the Ashwini. She is asking, just let me know, you said with the first slide, empower and two more. Can you say it again? What you explain on the
Yes.
first slide, they want to know.
Yes, sure. So ETI stands for empower, transform, inspire, change. So basically we want to empower the women, we want to transform their lives, and we want to make them into champions to inspire others. So I think that's where it
Hello.
lies. Yes.
I've got one question. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Ma'am, for the last 12 to 15 years within our India, we are talking about women empowerment, women enablement, women's appreciation. So many rules and regulations along with the SDG has been framed out. But what is your viewpoint? I want to know your personal opinion. Why it is not implemented in a very effective manner? What is the reason and the factors responsible for that? We are only going on talking and talking and talking. And all these policy resolutions are consisting of only number of the papers and nothing else. So I want to know your viewpoint as a social worker, and you are working at the spaces in your field. So what is your opinion, ma'am?
Thank you, Samita ji, for that question. I think my personal opinion is that there can be no real empowerment till you bring women at the center of the conversation. I think for far too long, men have dictated, and I'm just being very honest. It's no offense to any of the gentlemen on this conversation. But for something as basic as, I'm going to give you an example, Samita ji, when it comes to
Yes.
healthcare, okay?
Yeah.
When it comes to healthcare, how many women do you see on a panel which talks about health or empowerment?
Very small.
I am yet to see.
Yes.
I'm tired of being dictated to. I don't like this. I think women empowerment, yes, will remain on paper, on policy, unless we bring women into those conversations. So today you and I are talking, okay, and we are going to leave behind some thoughts for everybody here. But until and unless women become active part of conversations, and change will come slowly. It won't come. It's been with us for decades.
Yes.
So I think it will take time for us to also recover from that.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
There is a Amandeep. He has raised hand. I have sir, you can unmute yourself if you want to speak. Okay. Meanwhile, ma'am, we can take next question.
Sure.
There is one question. It's about, can you please discuss the problem relating to the increase of child marriage during COVID-19 with some examples?
So child marriage, it's been a curse which has stayed with us, right? And we have a law against it. It's not that differences were not made; they were made. I think I have personally done some amazing work with some amazing people. That all you need to do is keep your girls in school. If you are able to educate your young girls, you will see these rates drop. The reason COVID-19 impacted child marriage was exactly this. Schools shut down. Girls had no access to education. Financial problems started coming up because people lost their jobs. And when there are financial issues in the family, who does it impact first? It impacts the young girls, it impacts the women. And then we saw the rise in it. And it really disheartens me, but we have to also face reality that child marriage is up and the numbers are increasing. In certain states, it's becoming a serious problem again. But I do think that if we can tackle it once, if we come together, we can do it again. Your take-home message from this, and it is also linked to natural disaster. When natural disasters happen, schools are broken. Education is, there's the education link is broken for the young girls. That's why they are trafficked. That's why they are left to fend for themselves. That's why child marriages happen. So I think COVID-19, of course, has been unprecedented, but I think we understand the issue. Just take home this message that keep your girls in school. If you're able to do that, I think you'll be able to resolve this.
Ma'am, there is one more question, and it's asked, Madam, tribal society in general is considered as egalitarian, but do you observe prevalence of gender disparity?
Yes. So I should comment on that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. No, so I do agree with it. Yes, it on the face of it, yes. And they have their own rules and rituals actually, which they take very seriously. But gender differences are there everywhere. It doesn't matter which part of society you go in. Gender disparity runs through and runs deep, no matter where you stand in India or across the globe. So I think there is no debate on that. I think the responses should be the same. I don't think tribal societies need their own responses. I think we just need to understand how to communicate it with them. We can't just give them diktats and say, now you do this, now you don't do this. That's not the way it works for anybody.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Dear participant, if you have any more questions, you are welcome for that. But I feel the session was so explanatory, and that's why there are not many questions for you, but wonderful session, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. And if I can leave the link of the website here, I think.
Yes, ma'am. In chat, you can.
Everyone in meeting. So I'm just leaving it here, and anybody can reach out to me on the ID that's given. I'll also give my email if anybody wants to reach out.
And ma'am, your contact number also, please.
All right. All three as requested.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Okay, then Aarti, anything else or we can close out?
No, ma'am, we can close out. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you everybody for your patience, and take care. Be safe.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, with this, we will proceed to our next session of the day. Now, may I request Ms. Jayashree Lokhande, member of WDC, to introduce our next resource person. Over to you, Jayashree.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to introduce our eminent speaker, Mr. Tikender Panwar, sir. Sir was the directly elected deputy mayor of Shimla city. The city has been able to create a vision with the development plan that speaks about inclusive growth, greater plan, and social infrastructure. And in making not just the city, but the citizens resilient. Environment and ecology happens to be the major area of concern. And it is because of this reason that the forest cover is being enhanced in the city with the people's participation. A model for democratic decentralization is being developed by strengthening the ward sabhas and empowering the ward committees. Sir was also a member of the National Task Force in the country to review the 74th Constitutional, which speaks about decentralized governance. Apart from this, Sir has represented the city and the country on many international events. To name some, the following are those events. Sir was part of the delegation to South Africa for an urban LED strategies event. Sir was a member of the delegation to China to have a fellowship on urbanization for 1 month. Sir was part of the team to represent the city in World Congress. Sir was a regular contributor to Urban Update and other newspapers and magazines on urban issues. Sir was advisor Samruddha Bharat, a major think tank in the country. It's our privilege to have such eminent speakers. Now, I would like to request the sir to start our second session. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. So, hope my voice is audible. Is it fine?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I can see many students are there. 116. Huh? It's a huge number. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is, and how do you want me to speak? English or Hindi or bilingual? How is it that you want to do it?
Sir, as per your comfort.
Oh, give me one moment, just one moment, okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right, so I had to finish that. So maybe I think I'll try to speak in English and then probably we'll switch over Hindi English. And as the questions pour in, that's how I'm going to take it. Yeah, so I think half an hour, and if I remember, the topic happens to be Sustainable Development Goals and climate change, and of course, gender issue. I could speak my previous speaker who was eloquently speaking about some of the gender points. But I think I will come from a different lens, and that's how I want to point out 4 major issues actually when we speak about sustainable development goals, climate change, and according to me, I think something which many people do not believe, and that is that actually they might mark my words, and actually this is not a prophecy that I'm claiming, but mark my words, 10 years down the line, you'll find actually the sustainable development goals falling badly, flatly on the ground, because the way we are actually building our cities or the trajectory of development, A, it's neither climate resilient, B, it cannot achieve the desired sustainable development goals that we intend to, and C, actually, I do not find any reason for me to be happy, or for me to be like elated. Look, yeah, something is getting achieved. Actually, we are going from bad to worse. Unfortunately, that is a hard fact. And I call it somewhat like an ecological catastrophe. Why we are heading for an ecological catastrophe? Primarily, and actually some of the formulations do not come from me. Actually, these formulations come from the United Nations Charter, from the IPCC, and many other sources. Actually, the UN is focusing on 3 aspects. I add the 4th one, and here it goes. The first thing is actually, if you see, of course, we talk about climate change, and in that climate change, carbon emissions happens to be the most important factor, especially the emission of carbon gases that has taken place in the last 30 years. I again reiterate what I'm saying. I mean, that's quite startling, by the way. The emission of CO2 in the last 3 decades matches the CO2 that the human evolution has. 50% of the evolution that we came into being. I mean, do you know what does that mean? I mean, in simpler terms, I mean, whatever carbon emissions we have emitted since our evolutionary process, I mean, since our evolution to the last 30 years, we have emitted carbon gases exactly the same amount in the last 30 years. So actually, this explains that it's a serious issue, and actually something that has happened in the last 30 or 35 years, I would say in the last 200, 250 years, is actually what is leading to an ecological catastrophe. So when we talk about climate change, I think this is one of the important elements that we have to keep in mind, not just focusing on reducing carbon emissions. Of course, that is very important, but I think that is one of the important areas. So in the last 30 years, the total carbon emission, of course you can Google it, I mean, the total quantum of the carbon emissions, I mean, how much gigaton we have evolved. And actually some of the scientists are saying that actually our space and scope is gone. I mean, I mean, if we do not act really in a war zone, we will not be able to retract. We will not be able to actually get what we want to. So it's a serious issue. And as I told you, another interesting fact that you should know. So the carbon emissions, 30 years, 50% of the carbon emissions of human evolution. I hope our students know. I mean, we believe in the Darwinian theory of human evolution that actually, succession on a rock, and then that's how lichens, mosses, pteridophytes, plant kingdom, then animal kingdom, and through that, and billions and billions of years it took place for the final human evolution, and finally for the kind of human beings that we are here in this 22nd century. So, so why is it something has happened in the last 200 years, 250 years, that we have led ourselves to an ecological catastrophe? And in the last 30 years, I again reiterate, only 33% of the companies, or only 20% of 20 companies, I can name those 20 companies, only 20 companies are responsible for emitting 33% of the carbon emissions. Now you get that point, what I'm trying to say. In the last 30 years, actually 50% of the carbon emissions we have added 50% more carbon emissions, what our human evolution has added. It's one. And in these last 30 years, actually just 20 companies are responsible for contributing 33% of the total carbon emissions, which takes us to a very funny kind of a situation, where where actually we need to know, I mean, what exactly is to be done. I mean, so I think that's one aspect which is important, and unfortunately, still subsidies are being doled out to some of the largest fossil fuel companies and largest and actually in these 20 companies, more are actually uh, dealing with energy, cement, steel production. So, and they continue to get subsidies. That's the first part. The second part, I think, when I say it leads to an ecological catastrophe, happens to be the huge loss of biodiversity that is taking place. Now, why is it that the biodiversity is so very important? And when I say the huge loss of biodiversity, I think if you just have a figure that the pace in which we are losing our biodiversity is exactly similar to what we had in the Cretaceous extinction. I mean that's some 66, millions and billions of years ago. Uh, Actually, it is through our impact, and there is a correlation between the first point and the second point, and that's what I always tell. I'm not sure about Mumbai because I believe most of the students are from Bombay, aren't they, Aarti?
Sir, they are all around the India, I can say.
Okay.
Huh.
So, well, since I have now come to Delhi, I do not live in Simla, but I can tell you something very interesting, very funny, and from that you'll be able to gauge what I'm trying to build up. There is a connection between pollution in a town, in a city, and the growth of lichens. That's why I said succession on a rock. I mean, if you believe in the scientific basis of evolutionary process, then succession on a rock takes place first from inanimate to animate matter. I mean, when the physical inanimate structure converts into animate, that's life comes into being, is lichens. So lichens, mosses, and actually lichens do not you do not find lichens when there is pollution in the city. So I don't find lichens or mosses in Delhi. I'm not sure whether you find lichens and mosses in Mumbai or not. Of course, you come to Simla and then you'll find lots and lots of there. But that doesn't mean that new species are getting evolved even in Simla. I'm not an expert on that, but I don't think, except in 3 places in the world, that's the Western Ghats that you have in Maharashtra, the caves in Beijing, and of course the third is the Amazon forest, where the climate scientists still feel that there is a chance of some evolution of a new species to come. Else, actually, the extinction. We have virtually put a lid on the further evolution process. So the point is actually what I'm trying to build up is that the pace in which we are losing our is actually starting. And how does it affect us? Because it definitely affects us. If you see, there is a strong connection between different set of species, because humans have evolved in kind of engagement with lots of these species around. And but we have a very funny set of scientists, and this is what I've been quoting in several places. When we talk about the loss of biodiversity and the pace in which we are losing our biodiversity. So, and there's a connection between losing honeybees and human presence. If honeybees are gone, we are extinct. I mean, just keep that in mind, okay? And some of the scientists are believing that we have just 12 years left, 12 or 13 years, then our extinction will begin, because we've already occupied the carbon space. There is hardly any space limit. Required. If we do not reduce, I hope our students know that the entire discussion in the world at present, let me bring that also to focus when I say carbon emissions, why it is important. Because if we do not restrict the increase in temperature to less than 1.5 degrees than to our pre-industrial times, then actually large areas of the earth would actually face extinction because of global warming. Most of the areas would get, especially coastal areas, and especially if you're living in Mumbai, Kerala, all of that would be they're already on the verge of extinction, but they would be very severely affected. And you can imagine the kind of loss it will impact on human lives, on their assets, whatever, just name it there. So therefore, it is important that we go back to our Paris climate talks in COP21. I was also a delegate there, and where earlier the scientists were believing that we have to restrict it to less than 2 degrees centigrade, but then says, no, it's not 2 degrees centigrade. We cannot go beyond 1.5 degrees centigrade. Already we are crossing somewhere 2, 3, and 2. So something drastically has to be done. And when I say something drastically has to be done, because these carbon emissions comes from fossil fuels, the largest contributor happens to be fossil fuels, cement, steel production. Actually, so the entire trajectory of development in the world has to be revisited. How do we do that? So therefore, I said carbon emissions, the first point. Second point is, and this is quite linked to loss of biodiversity. So some of the scientists believe that, no, that's not a problem. If you lose the honeybees, then we will create robotic honeybees. Who the hell, who will tell them that we can't have billions and billions of honeybees? Okay. So, it's more capital driven, more that, you have the technology, and technology will be the panacea for all the ills that we are witnessing. That will be a real disaster that we are. So that's the second point. I think it is very important. So to ensure that we minimize the space of loss of biodiversity, I think the certain areas, open spaces, forests, the denuding of the forests that we need to protect. And unfortunately, the way we are building up, and I will come to that, some concrete examples in India, is actually quite dangerous. So that's the second point. The third point, which is actually discussed and which is there for us for another thing, is the huge rise of pollution. Pollution, not just from, the way, of course, adding phosphorus and nitrogen, that leads to our oceanic, high concentrations of phosphorus and nitrogen, which leads to exotic kind of, the kind of asphyxiation that we find. That's how we found in the pandemic, why most of the people were dying, because of, the virus was hitting their lungs, and that's how they couldn't breathe further. So actually, that kind of pollution is witnessed acutely. So that's also one of the areas which is important. And actually, this is what I've been saying time and again. You go to our cities, we have amongst the 20, I think we have the 14 worst polluted cities of the world. Forget about India. And this speaks about the way we have been building, we have been developing cities. And actually, what we are breathing, and this is what I've been telling everyone, is invisible garbage. Actually, it's invisible garbage that we breathe in our cities and towns. So actually, this is an important area. So the kind of again, I say we have to revisit the way we are building cities in the sense that, take for example, solid waste management. How all of a sudden we find that, from 220 grams per capita, all of a sudden there is a rise of 440 to 450 grams per capita of solid waste. I mean, so when we talk about management, I don't think it's a problem with management. It's a problem of the way we are actually developing ourselves, or the way we are living. So I think more to do with, and that's why I'll try to build that argument later. And actually, so it has to do more with more capital intensive technologies. Okay, build a solid waste management plant, waste to energy plant. None of the cities, I'm telling you, I've visited most of the cities in the country. I was a National Task Force member to review the 74th Constitutional Amendment, and none of these waste to energy plants are working because our calorific value of the waste is abysmally low. So the energy, and we can see landfills and landfills of waste where we do not know. You come to Delhi and I can show you 3 or 4 large landfill sites. And in fact, the Supreme Court commented in one of the observations recently that soon, if you do not stop what you're doing, soon you will cross the height of the Qutub Minar. So, the landfill site will cross the height of the Qutub Minar. I mean, this is disastrous. What are we talking about? So I think that's the fourth point which I have added in this discourse is the way and the pace in which land use changes taking place. That's phenomenal. And actually that has to do more with the kind of, what I call the post-90s in India and post-70s or 60s, what in political economy we term as a neoliberal capitalist developmental model, which is, by the way, very disastrous. And why I point it out, why it is important, because for the simple reason, since I come from, by the way, Aarti, just let me know, because,
we have time. We have time.
When should I stop? Yeah. So just let me know, because just remind me.
No issues. You can continue.
Yeah. So, yeah, because you are actually engaging with the person who has been in politics for long, and what better than more than 100 students? A political person would not miss that opportunity to take more time. Just
we are considering this is a valuable time. We are getting a lot of knowledge from you and different perspectives as well, sir.
So I'll try to do that. I'll try to be brief. Yeah. Instead of semantics, I'll try to be more concrete. So the point is that in these last 30 years, in fact, I will be actually bringing out a book to understand how our cities have actually changed, the transformation that has happened in cities. We had our plans, Mumbai Development Authority, Delhi Development Authority. None of these authorities have worked, and then we have proliferation of slums and whatnot. So actually the land use change has taken place at a very rapid pace where substantial chunk of land actually has got converted. Agricultural fields have got converted into real estate, and then our forests have been denuded, where we have lots of development taking place, and actually it is quite precarious if you ask me. And it is also very important and it's very rapid the way. And the reason that I find, and that's why I said it's post-90s in India and post-1970s, 60s, 70s in the world when this was happening. And this is more to do with the neoliberal capitalism, and that's what we were discussing in Quito. That's the capital of Ecuador in Habitat 3, where John Claus, who was the executive director of Habitat 3, I was also a delegate there, and kept on reminding that, hey, look, and there's a connection between sustainable development goals and the way we are building, we are developing. So he said, forget about SDGs if we do not revisit the 3 decades of laissez-faire. Laissez-faire means free market economy principles of developing our systems. Then this is not going to help. And actually, we are clueless where we have it. Of course, it is humongously iniquitous, and the kind of iniquity we have produced in our cities it's startling. We can easily understand. But the way we have denuded our natural resources, the conflict that we have brought in exploiting our natural resources, and I'll come to that. What is the reason for that? And this has taught us, like, look, hey, this is beyond our scope and capacity to sustain. And that's why I brought that to the 3 decades of carbon emissions, equivalent to 50% of the carbon emissions that are taking place now. So why is that? I think one of the reasons is the way post-70s, post-90s in India, the economy actually dealt with the city. Because I come from a city perspective. Actually, cities were told that, look, you are actually you are no more managers. You don't have to manage it. You are entrepreneurs. So you have to think like an entrepreneur. You have to be competitive. So Mumbai will be competing with Shanghai to attract investments. And in order to attract investments, then you give a dam to your environmental laws. I mean, because you have to attract capital, you have to ensure that large capital-intensive technologies you build, and the kind of typologies, building typologies. And actually, the pandemic has taught us, by the way, the complete hollowness of the way we have been building our cities. But take, for example, let me just build just one concrete example will suffice. See, the building typologies that we've been doing, and I'm sure because in Mumbai, I've seen in Calcutta, which was one of my favorite cities. You go to Calcutta and you'll find a house. Look at the sustainability of that house, okay? So in that house, you'll have a pond. And the pond, they will have fish. Simultaneously, you'll have poultry. So, and Calcutta, the Bengalis are very fond of eating fish, of poultry. So look at this relationship. A house, of course, they'll have net, no air conditions. So they'll have net to ensure that they are protected from malaria. And but then 3-story, 4-story, but every house adjoining the house would have a pond. Okay, so that was the natural resource, and through that natural resource, they could cultivate and they could harvest that fish. But now, if you go to Calcutta, it reminds me just like you enter Delhi. The building typologies. They never had glass in their windows. Okay, it was either wooden or open. You just have now everywhere you find glass because you have that air conditioning large capital industries who want their air conditions to be fit in, and the large glass capital intensive technology industry. Imagine, can you believe? Now glasses, and now in the pandemic we have learned that in a high-rise building, someone staying 18th story, another one staying in 6th story. The 18th story person is also at a very high chance of getting infected than if someone is at the 6th story. So I think we have to revisit all these typologies. But what has happened is the kind of land use change that we have witnessed is like substantial. And one of the reasons why this land use change took place is because we treated our cities not as living units, of the people, where people live, but as entrepreneurs. So we wanted to make them competitive. We wanted them to attract investments, and we wanted, every bit of whatever was there in our arsenal to ensure that we just ensure that all these capital-intensive technologies are used, and these technologies will finally provide a solution for us. Now, I have a very interesting figure. I hope I'm able to get to that figure. What this led us to? Where have we landed? Interestingly, where we have landed is actually, take for example, housing. Okay. Now, livable city should have been. If you're changing, I can understand you change the land use. And so, I want to share some anecdotes. I was also running a show on the television called Urban Agenda. Long back, a year ago, I did some 60 episodes. And but then that channel was too radical, and our present discourse didn't want that channel to run, and it just stopped the funding. the funding agency was, and the channel was like collapsed. Yeah, so, but one of the episodes, why I'm pointing that out is one of the episodes that I was really fascinated to do. Because most of these shoots we did in the studio, but some of the shoots we did on the site. Okay, so in Gurgaon, And take for example, what is it that how are we building our cities? I don't know how many of your students are aware the way Gurgaon has been developed. It's a classical case of laissez-faire, free market economy. Ask the private builder, and you know what happens Aarti, in Gurgaon. Even if there are clouds on your head, the people start worrying because they know the moment it rains, even if it rains little, it is going to get flooded. Why? Because you have not given adequate not paid adequate interest to the water contours, okay, which way the water used to flow, and block the flows, and actually that's what was supposed to. But Gurgaon also was a land of many ponds, many small lakes. Now, why I was fascinated to do one of the shoots in Gurgaon? Because I do not know, I think most of your students are post-90s. They were born after 1990. So they may not be knowing how Shah Rukh Khan became Shah Rukh Khan. So I was very keen to know. Now, why I say Shah Rukh Khan? Of course, everyone knows how Shah Rukh Khan became Shah Rukh Khan. But Shah Rukh Khan came into prominence, A, with theatre initially, because he is from Delhi. And B, actually, in those times, there used to be a serial on the television called Fauji. So he acted in that series. I mean, it was a very fascinating series. And the entire shooting of Fauji took place in this lake in Gurgaon, and I was told by the neighboring community that once Shah Rukh Khan literally drowned. I mean, it was that deep. The lake was that deep. So we were doing stories on how actually the stories of missing lakes. Okay? So we thought we must go to the site and find out what is the condition. You'll be astonished that the lake is gone, a high-rise building is there, and apart from a high-rise building, we find actually a small park. So you can imagine, I mean, and it's not a story of one town, one city. It has happened everywhere. Now, what do you imagine if you're building that? You go to Kashi, you go to Varanasi, the Prime Minister's constituency. It rains for half an hour, it gets flooded. You go to this redevelopment that is taking place in Delhi in Chandni Chowk, it gets flooded. Why Mumbai every year gets flooded? And I learned that just to clean the ponds, I mean, there's a budget of I think 1,600 crores. What the hell are we doing with this? So these are not sustainable models, okay? These are actually more to do with private capital intensive technologies to, so that brings me to the fifth point. And actually cities have become centers of capital of accumulation. Massive capital accumulation takes place through these processes. And when I say these processes, I think it is important that, and of course, before I jump to that, I think it is also important that the land uses, I mean, just imagine, because I believe Lakshadweep is not far from Mumbai, it's also on the western coast. Why do you all of a sudden find that now Lakshadweep, you will find land use redevelopment taking place, where your coral reefs will be gone, and you'll find some big business people going to Lakshadweep, for that matter, Andaman Nicobar Islands. So this land use is the change in land use is taking at a very fast pace, and had it happened in a way that it had helped the people. I mean, had it addressed the housing problem. Take for example, okay, you change the land use and you construct houses. That's why I cited Gurgaon example. What is the story? And that's that. And I'm not talking about working class colonies. I'm talking about middle class colonies. I mean, working class colonies are, that transformation. If I get time, I'll speak about that. The kind of informality that has creeped in, and where they live. I'll just come to that in case I remember, because I may forget. I don't prepare my lectures. I just speak extempore. So, but yeah, if it comes to mind, definitely you'll get. You'll come to know about that. So, but this is an interesting figure because I wrote an article in that I just compiled this data, and this is what I'm talking about: the middle class housing issues. The JLL survey tells us that in 2020, 0.46 million houses, properties, that is 4.6 lakh properties, built at the cost of $550 billion, that is 40 lakh crore rupees in India. I again repeat, 4.6 lakh properties built with a worth of 40 lakh crore are ready but unsold. People don't have the capacity to buy. Okay, 4.6 lakh. Likewise, 0.95 million, that is 9 0.5 lakh properties worth 80 lakh crore. 80 lakh crore are stuck in construction process, and this is according to the RBI Pause survey. So where are we heading? There are houses. You come to Delhi, you go to Noida, JP. I mean, there's a huge condominium of JP, but there are no buyers. And at the same time, you have proliferation of slums taking place, where 40% of the people live in slums. So where is the disconnect? Then we have, those master plans. Where are these master plans, by the way? Who are these master plans addressing to? The Mumbai Development Authority, prepares a master plan for Mumbai. But are these plans ever made in conjunction with the people? Have the people ever had a word in preparing these master plans? Now, why is it? I mean, the second element that I wanted to bring to the fore is that why is it that this is happening? As I told you, the first thing, and I think that is what I differ from many of the climate scientists, who actually think that they want to actually bring in the whole question of reductionism. They want to reduce the entire theory to, okay, climate, just climate. Actually, it's not climate, it's the interplay of forces, interplay of political economy, the way we are building ourselves, the way we seek to build 30 years, 40 years hence. I think all that has to be taken into consideration. And I think that also has a connect with the way we treat our nature. There's a strong connect between nature and human beings. Human being happens to be a product of nature. So if life is human being, body is nature, and so it is kind of so there is a limit how much you can extract. But especially in the last 30 years or 40, 50 years, I would say, actually what has happened is commoditization of not just human labor, commoditization of not just essential services, but commoditization of, when I say commoditization, I believe the students understand that it's a process where we treat nature also as a saleable commodity, okay, where you can extract, where you can extract maximum profit out of such properties. Actually, that has taken place at a very fast pace. And we find a complete disconnect between the way these processes are being done and the way actually we are heading. And actually, and that's why if you just visit some of the large capital, especially fossil fuel driven cities or countries, take for example Canada. Now, I was there in Montreal for a mayor's congress, and of course in Montreal, because of the very proactive intervention of the then of the current mayor, who built this movement. That, I mean, she said, I mean, this is enough. I mean, we don't want. So they have roads connecting Montreal to even 7,000 kilometers. They don't have a rail network. Okay, so you have fossil fuel. I mean, you use the fuel, and of course you use those roads, and very good roads, but they don't have public transport at all. So now Montreal is revisiting as a town, as a city, to build in public transport, public utility. So you understand what I'm trying to say. So the entire building trajectory has been such. And now what we are witnessing, I mean, that's why I said housing, one area, another one is mobility. How do we use fossil fuel? It is actually quite strange for me to tell you that the kind of, for example, Mumbai, I do not know how many of people travel by that metro. Now the entire rush in these large cities is to build a metro, not realizing that 1 kilometer of metro costs 400 crores. That's the cost, the capital cost that comes in. So in Jaipur, there are no people going in the metro. There are no people. In Bangalore, there are no people going in the metro. So instead of focusing on public mobility, and instead of focusing on more bicycle lanes, more pedestrianization, because that's what we learn and we come to know, that if you understand, and all this is linked to climate change, that almost 80% of the workforce in the cities commute not more than 12 kilometers in a radius. So if they have proper bicycle lanes, cycles, they can easily commute to that. But you'll find the rush is for, I mean, either it's for widening the roads, bringing guzzlers, or it is for metros, which which are largely capital intensive. These are actually unsustainable. These are unsustainable models, which cannot sustain. A, they're neither climate resilient. B, they are neither, nor are they, uh, going to address the huge kind of inequity that exists in societies. And this leads me to another funny anecdote, which I learned actually in Leipzig. Leipzig is a city in Germany where I did my fellowship on urban mobility. And it's a beautiful place in the sense that it's one of the cities in Germany that's a precursor for free urban mobility. I again reiterate free, because they don't charge. They in fact enthuse you to use either their buses or whatever urban mobility they have in town. But of course, they extract money from some other source. If you still want to use a car, then they will tax you, I think, 4 or 5 times. But what they were planning to do is that they had 8 lanes in the city, so virtually a boulevard kind of stuff. And then they were reducing those 8 lanes to 6 lanes, further handing over those lanes to the pedestrians and to the cyclists. Already 25% of the people in a town like the commute on bicycles. I am not sure what happens in Mumbai, but I'm sure in Mumbai, I think it's not only 4 or 5% who would be using bicycles. But of course, you have that train network, which probably caters to 50 to 60, but which is a classical way. In fact, that is what should have been strengthened instead of building those metros and all. So, but that's not the paradox. The paradox is that Leipzig sustains its economy on manufacturing of a car called Porsche. Now, Porsche is a very large, costly guzzler, and 70% of the employment comes through this process. Manufacturing plant and ancillaries, ancillarization, and all that stuff. So I told this professor of ours, I said, why do you befool us? He said, what do you mean? I said, you in your town are reducing the mobility of the cars, of the guzzlers, handing over those spaces to pedestrians, to cyclists, but you sustain your employment on the manufacturing of one of the largest guzzlers called the Porsche. So then for whom are you manufacturing these cars for? And the funniest answer that I got in life is, he said, for you in Asia, South Asia, you have a rising middle class, you have the World Bank, take loans from the World Bank, widen your roads, and we sell our cars to you. They will not buy their own cars, okay? Let me remind you. They will sell those cars to us. So, that aspect of development also has to be kept in mind. What is good for us is good for us. May not be good for someone else. So I think that process of development has to be. That's one part. I think. The second part is, which is also quite linked to. Yeah, I'll come to that. Maybe questions I can take a little later, because there's Nita Rope. Yeah?
Yes, sir. We will take questions later.
It's about, at the macro level, there's also a question of climate justice. When I say climate justice, because those who have done the least, take for example, the least developed countries. And there's a very interesting report by the United Nations called Anatomy of a Silent Crisis, where it tells us that actually the countries that contribute not even 1% of the carbon emissions actually face 50% of the disasters. so that's why we had that Kyoto Protocol, differential, common but differential responsibility. Unfortunately, nothing of this sort is happening. They were supposed to transfer us technologies, they were supposed to transfer us money so that we could adapt. And they means the Western countries, the developed countries, but that is not. That's why I've been saying these sustainable development goals would just be a veneer on some sugar-coated candy, nothing more than that. And actually, we are finding that the end result is that this is not the way how we have to do it. Except the fact that some positive elements and voices we can witness. And this takes me to 3 instances, I would say. The first is when we were in Paris, we knew that actually things, especially Trump was the president of the United States of America, which happens to be one of the largest polluter of the world. So, and since Trump said, no, I won't buy your argument. We don't accept the, the, the climate deal. And Trump was ousted. You know, Trump is out. And we find new person. And if you see the new Green Deal, which actually which got developed in the process of the election campaign, it's a completely transformation from what Trump was saying. Now they've said, yeah, they are into that. How will it lead? Or does it just mean some carbon bonds and all? We are not sure about that. But yeah, I think some changes taking place. Likewise, we find in England, I mean, if you see the Labour Party, they have gone to the extent of saying that you know, if the companies do not meet the green requirements, then such companies will be disbanded from the stock exchange. So that's something interesting. Can you ask, for example, Reliance, that if you do not do, I mean, you can't even think of that. But you know, in England, we are witnessing, we are hearing those voices. You know, can we ask Adani's in India that look, if you don't, you know, the kind of transformation that is happening in coal and all, I think that is something very positive that we have witnessed. Of course, that also sounds quite totalitarian in that sense. But yeah, I mean, there is some scope. So at the end of the day, I think what is important is when we talk about climate change, sustainable development goals, I think both are interrelated. And when I say both are interrelated, it has to go back to the way we have been building ourselves, way we have building our system. And actually, the way we have been building our systems, time and again, we have been told repeatedly through many interventions, especially the IPCC report, that's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that look, hey, this is not just that this is not the way how you have to go ahead. So I think that's one part. And I did not want to say much on gender because I think my previous speaker spoke of that. But this also has a direct connection with the way, as it is, we are one of the worst probably in the world. If you have the World Economic Forum report that we have already slid some, I think 20 spaces down, and we are, I think, in 156 countries where we stand 140. So we can imagine where we are. And then there are various reports. We have the McKinsey report, which says that you know, actually even in the pandemic, more women have lost their jobs, and the labor participation rate of women has substantially come down. If you see during the pandemic, so we can easily understand the kind of asset holding capacity for women, and also you know. Why it is important, because in countries like India, it is, I'm not sure whether you are aware of it, but out of 10, I again repeat, out of 10, 8 women are actually engaged in getting water to their homes. Now, can you believe, I mean, what kind of systems are we building? So I think the first thing that has to happen is to ensure that at least potable water reaches every household. That's, I mean, just believe that, just believe that. And I think one of the important interventions also, and the land holding, 65% of your female workforce is in agriculture. And if you see their assets holding percentage, out of 65%, the asset holding is not even 13.87%. So you have 65% women in agriculture, but their assets, I mean, assets to the women are not in 13.8, no, less than 14%. And if you come to cities, the way actually this transformation has taken place, informality has creeped in, and it has jumped from almost 75% to 94% is in the informal sector. And the informal sector is rather more pernicious. It's more scary when we talk about female labor participation. And we have seen how it has happened in our cities. So all, I mean, if I have to bring all these factors together, then I would say, A, that it's an ecological catastrophe. B, it has to do with the systemic changes. And this is when I say the systemic changes, I think the current form of developmental model will not address. some sugar-coated word, something, take for example, plant a tree. Nonsense when you plant a tree. For the simple reason, because uh, uh, if you add 50 trees you require if one car is added to the system. Okay, so 50 trees you require. So that's not the way. That's not the solution. I mean, the way we are heading. Why can't we go back to the point that why should we not focus on urban mobility? I mean, more pedestrianization, more cycles, more public transport, taxing the guzzlers, like we have in Singapore. There is a certificate of entitlement, COE. If you buy a car, you have to pay another price. So that that's how green thieves. I mean, I think we'll have to think in those terms. But at the same time, as I told you, I think it is also important that how do we look at nature? How do we minimize this conflict that we have built? And I am of the opinion, and I am of the argument that what we require is not restoration, what people think. What we require is restitution. It has to be restituted back because we are a product of nature. And the way we have harmed it, we have actually, some of the processes are irreversible, by the way. We cannot bring that back to the fore. So I think the unfortunate part is that unfortunately we still go by the same plan. We are still actually the environment impact assessment. If you see, the laws have been diluted. We have seen how in Lakshadweep, or for that matter, in Andamans, or for that matter in Ladakh, because I am responsible for writing a vision document for Leh. I mean, do you think, the tribal status has still not been restored and, brought on the schedule? Is it political? It's cynic reason. There are researches on a massive mineral wealth that is there in Ladakh. Now that massive mineral wealth is to be extracted. If you give rights to the local people, then the local people will say, hey, where is our share? Okay. So they don't want that share to be parted on. And then we have seen how the coal fields are. Actually, these are disturbing. And I am the central Vista in Delhi, where we are finding 125 acres of land has been actually diverted from public spaces to government spaces, which is a disaster, just because you require a large mention of the Prime Minister and you require a parliament, which people don't require parliament. People want open spaces. People want houses. And so I think it's really, really, really challenging. The way, what I feel, and this is what I've been actually working, is actually more decentralization. If someone asks me, what is the way forward? I think we have to get rid of this business of transnational corporation consultants coming to the cities and adjoining themselves with the development authorities, not answerable to the people. Actually, this planning process has to go to the people through the 74th Constitutional Amendment. Let them decide. No? Why in Ladakh, people sitting in Delhi should decide how a house is to be constructed in Ladakh? Whereas in Delhi, you require energy to actually for cooling. There you require energy for heating. Okay, so the house construct, the typologies of the houses has to be, and this is what we are experimenting in Ladakh, that when it is -25, -26 in the winters, your room can still be somewhere around 18 to 20 degrees without heating. The only thing is south facing, what you do, what kind of, and all through your native material and indigenous material. You don't have to export material. Straw, mud, thickness of the wall, solar, passive, blackening of the wall, etc. But in Delhi, if you have to build the typology, why don't you engage the people at the lower level? Let them decide, no, what kind of houses you. But you have a reinforcement concrete house built in Ladakh when it's -20 degrees, and then you find chilblains in the hands of the students. This is not the way forward. I think with that, I would like to finish off. And of course, keep the questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Really very informative session. And I can see in the chat, a lot of people are saying very knowledgeable, helpful session and the very informative session. And really, sir, from my side as well, I'm saying really, really informative session. We had 6 sessions. This was the 6th, but I'll tell you, this was really very informative. Different aspect, different perspective we have received from your sessions. So there
I
is
wish we could just finish off with this online stuff and could be there in the campus. That would have been far better.
yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
you
sir. We will love to have you in our
Let's
campus.
hope.
Definitely.
Let's hope.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I was there in the JJ College of Arts and some.
Okay.
Yeah, I was there. Now, just as soon as I don't have time, but I could have told you, the architecture of JJ College. You go to JJ College in Simla, you find the same architecture, okay? Because the Britishers built Simla, the Britishers built that JJ College of architecture. Yeah. So, yeah. Anyway, yeah. Please go ahead.
Sir, first question is.
Can you just read those questions to me so that?
Yes. I'm reading for you, sir. So first question is from Neeta Dhote. She is asking, we find huge traffic snarls and congestion in Simla every tourist season. As the deputy mayor what was your experience and how did you tackle the problem? Have there been any good chances as a result of your intervention?
Okay, so the first point is we have huge traffic slums. 100% true. Not just in tourist season, by the way. Every season, I mean, even when there are no tourists. For the simple reason, because there's a huge addition of cars, and the way we have actually inherited the town and further developed and built it, there are not many roads. In fact, we didn't want to construct roads. We don't want to construct more roads because more roads. Let me just tell students that only 25% of the houses are constructed are linked to the roads. 75% houses actually are pedestrians, and they have to walk to work. No, don't give me that look, Aarti, because that's how the mountain town is. That's how it should be. Okay, because if you construct more roads, then you make the hill vulnerable for different kind of when it rains and for landslides, all that stuff. So you don't want more roads. We don't want more roads. You want more pedestrian paths. That's the first thing. But then, take for example, if you have fire, then so if fire, we have fire hydrants almost every part. In 5 minutes or even seconds, I can tell you, the water hydrant works. Water hydrant means they're all underground water hydrants. I mean, of course, this we got from the British legacy. That's how the British engineering was like. I'm not a fan of that, by the way. The British, I really hated it, the way they've explained. But their engineering salutes to the engineering. They have actually really, in fact, we have to go back to some of the basics in drains, how to construct drains. And take, for example, these water hydrants. And every nook and corner of the town had that water hydrant. They open and the water will reach so that it can mitigate a disaster. But yes, this has happened. This is something beyond the scope and control of the city, because they're divergent agencies. But yeah, we did pass a mobility plan, and which again focuses more on pedestrian. And we also introduced a green piece. So, the government didn't allow us to do that. They said, no, after GST, you can't levy a tax. So we actually said, no, it's a green piece. Let's see how that comes up. But yeah, I think what is required more is to have more tunnels in the town. For the simple reason, because instead of taking a loop, because mountain, it's a cone. Okay, so if you have more tunnels and you allow pedestrians to go through that tunnel, and if a car, then you didn't avoid that loop. So probably that could be one of the interventions. But all said and done, the way and number and the volume in which cars are being added, we did some like knee-jerk stuff. For example, in Simla, if you do not have a parking space, you can't buy a car. You can't buy a car. That's law. But people are like, jugaad. I mean, someone's telling me, I don't know, how does India work? I mean, your master plans have always failed. I said, India is I don't know whether you heard the theory by A.K. Ramanujan, the Indian way of thinking. So the Indian way of thinking is jugaad, no? So people will still buy cars. So what do? They won't register in Simla. They will go to their native place in Kangla and then come. So I don't know. So I think what is required is more proactive intervention, but which people uh, will realize eventually that once they get stuck in jam. Like I used to commute to my office as deputy mayor. In fact, I was considered to be the cycle mayor of the town on a bicycle, and I had an elevation of some 500. Even in Delhi, I used the bicycle and of elevation of 500 meters and a distance of I think 9 kilometers. I used to travel every day, come to the office on bicycle, go back on bicycle. And I'm telling you, I used to reach earlier than it took by bus or by car because they were always caught in it. No, I was never. And if the deputy mayor is riding bicycle, and everyone would give way. Oh, yeah. Of course, now they won't recognize me. But so the point is that we have to think of the box. We have to create those spaces. If so, have there any good chances of changes as a result of intervention? I don't think because our intervention was very limited, so I don't think that there have been good changes. But I would suggest, Nita, there is a consciousness, and that consciousness is going to bounce back, and that will speak of the resilience. Now, I'll share another anecdote. It's not everywhere that you have a traffic snarl. Just two roads are motorable roads. All the other roads where you can use a motor, you cannot use it for your cars. It's sealed. It's restricted only for the ambulance. So, for example, the mall, the ridge, some of the other important roads where we do not allow mobility. I mean, automobile, or you can say combustion automobility, where we don't allow cars. So one of our chief justices, who came from Jammu, Mr. Gupta, V.K. Gupta, he passed an order. He said this is a British legacy, and this is not. Of course, it was a British. It is still a British legacy with the malls and you can easily find the difference. I mean, you come in the mall, you lower bazaar, ridge. I mean, the levels of pollution would be extremely, extremely different. What you find on the cart road, where so he passed an order that it's a British legacy. I am finishing this legacy, so everyone should be allowed to take a car, and I will be the first one to take my car to the ridge. And we have a Gaiety Theatre, to the Gaiety Theatre. Do you know what happened? Next day, he was the only person who took his car. None from Simla. That's the consciousness. None from Simla took her or his car to the mall or to the ridge. No, they said it's quite sanctum, sanctorous to us. We will not take our cars. Eventually, the Supreme Court said, what a foolish judge he was. I mean, we want spaces for police. So the Supreme Court set aside that judgment. And fortunately, our mall, which we were able to save. So yes, you find traffic snarls at the cart route, but since there's no traffic, because you don't allow. So I think that is what is required more. But I told you, if we have tunnels, there is a plan to construct some tunnels. There is also a plan for a ropeway, so that you can just come in the ropeway, park your car outside, and then you can just roam the town. So what I think the mountain town requires is qualitative difference in tourism as well. Not the kind of tourism that they are getting now. They would come, spread trash all around on Friday, Saturday evening, and Sunday they again go back. That's not sustainable tourism. Yes, the mountains have to rethink. It's not just the volume, sheer volume that should enter mountain town, but I think some sustainability, stay for some time, and if you respect the laws of the mountain towns. Yeah. I'm not sure, Nita, whether I've been able to address your question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Definitely. So next question is, what will be the effect of 5G on environment?
What will be the
4G and 5G network? What will be the impact of that on environment?
On what?
5G.
Impact on what? Impact on what?
Environment.
I'm not sure actually. I'm not sure how, because there are no case studies as of now. But I come from a political economic background, and I can tell you that the Internet of Things is a billion-dollar industry. The point is, of course, I also want to have my mobile, press the button here, and put off lights at my home. Fantastic. Not going by the capital cost. I want to press my button, put off my water meter. Fantastic. Looks so good. This is all part of the smart city bandwidth, okay? The Internet of Things. So, but the point is, who is extracting profit? Is it, is there some redistribution that is taking place to the people apart from the services that we render? Or is it just the private capital that extracts a humongous profit in these cities? Or it could be one of the ventures which actually further, in fact, consolidates this inequity in the cities. So I think we require more data to that. What would be the effect on 5G? Because without that, I think it would be too premature. But I can just share some of the anecdotes. Take, for example, the way we are building our smart cities. Not even 1% of the smart cities budget is linked to the climate change adaptability that should have been there in invariably all the cities. So yeah, I think that is important. But if with the 5G we are able to reduce our carbon footprint, well, nothing like that. Yeah, nothing like that. But if we do not, and there are studies that very preliminary studies that states the kind of hard infrastructure that is required for the development of 5G is that at the end of the day we are actually not able to actually reduce our carbon footprint. In fact, we enhance our carbon footprint further. So then I think it would be, but then that doesn't mean that we go from 5G to 2G. In fact, we go from 5G to 6G. Yeah, I think it will take some time to tell us how we proceed further and how we go there. Yeah, but Vaishnavi, I think we require some more time to really assess that.
So there is one more question. Do you think that to developing infrastructure, we are harming the mother nature? It's obvious.
Definitely. Definitely. See, but the point is, how do we build the infrastructure? So that doesn't mean that you do not require that infrastructure. How are we doing it? Now, take the example. Again, let me share an anecdote with you. In Patna, and I can tell you, invariably in all these smart cities, they are giving a dam to the natural course of water, or to the natural sources. In fact, it's all hard infrastructure that is there. So, in Patna, when there was a similar conference, of course, a physical conference, and in Patna, we were supposed to. I was asked to write the disaster mitigation plan for Patna. Why I was asked? Because in Simla, we were able to create an atlas, and there's something quite new that we did. That's how I was also called in the NPDRR, the National Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction, to speak about the Shimla experience. So what we did in Simla is that we were able to map the vulnerabilities even at the ward level. Instead of a city level plan, we created a ward level, and from ward even to the neighborhood level plan. Mapping the vulnerabilities, what we call the hazard vulnerability risk assessment, HVRA, and then to adapt our communities to meet those challenges. So it's called the Shimla Atlas, the Shimla Plan. So they said similarly you write this Patna. So I remember Vyas Saab was the chief secretary, and he was also the chairperson of the Patna. In state we had the State Disaster Management Authority, SDM. I said, Vyas Saab, I will write the plan, but do you think will it ever be implemented? He said, forget about the implementation. You just write the plan. Okay. So it took some time. Whatever tools, there are many tools, and qualitative, quantitative data, assemble that, creative. It's one of the finest plans that probably created. 7 months down the line, Patna was flooded. What the plan? What the house can be flooded? I said, yes, I told you. I had told you nobody is going to listen to the plan. Okay. So the plan speaks one language and the parallel track goes another direction. Okay. So, because we told them, hey, you cannot disturb the water channels. And everywhere you're finding that. So, these hard infrastructure. So, what, say, for example, if we have, I just wrote an article, probably you can Google it, and it was published in the Deccan Herald. That in Dharamsala, just 3-4 days ago, we had flash floods. In mountains, we don't have floods, okay? Floods are always in the plains. Why is it that it is flooding even in the mountains? For the simple reason, the way we have actually built our smart cities, but Dharamshala is also one of the smart cities, designated smart cities in the country. So, I think if still you have to build that infrastructure, you must have a geologist, you must have an hydrologist to ensure that you respect the flow, you respect the different rock layers that exist in those areas. But have you ever heard a contractor hiring a hydrologist, a geologist? Have you ever heard a report? Has that ever come in public domain? Never. And even in these large companies that construct, these 4-laning or 6-laning, it is all on paper. If you go on ground, the data doesn't match. These are actually unsustainable. How do we correct that? I think we have to create tools and ways. We have to create answerability. The whole question of answerability of the system. And I think we were able to do that in Simla. I could get time some other time, probably, or then physically come to explain the Shimla water story, where we were able to, when people were dying because of epidemic every alternate year. Now, since 2016, we don't have a single case. How did we do that? That's the whole question of how we develop that utility. So, yeah, but I think it will take time. We park it.
So we will definitely keep a session on that. We will like to hear that. Really, a case study of something like that, we really like to hear, sir. We will tell our other department, please bring sir for that session. What do you say, Vanita ma'am? We can bring them again for that.
Yes, absolutely.
But I would love to be physically present there.
Yes, we will love to. We will love to
That
have
also
you in
will-
our campus. Definitely. After we are waiting when the lockdown is uplifting and we are physically in the campus. Sir, will you take more questions? Is it okay with you?
Aarti, go for one more question.
Okay.
It is asked by the Ujwala Gupta.
Okay. Sir, would you like to shed some light on situation of Jharkhand and its tribe? Please, I will enrich with this knowledge. He's asking. She is asking. Sorry.
Ujjwala, I've never been to Jharkhand.
Okay, Jharkhand and the tribes. She is asking.
The tribes definitely. See, what I'm trying to build an argument is one of the forms and one of the ways. And let me also tell you, this is something what I have coined. I mean, I don't know whether I'll be able to paraphrase it correctly now, because I don't remember. That, the best protectors of the environment are the local communities. And there's a direct link between empowering the local communities. I again reiterate, there's a direct link between empowering the local communities and adapting for climate change. This is a complete, because they've lived here for centuries and centuries in the forest. All of a sudden, our consultants come from transnational corporations from the world and say, you've denuded the forest. Just move out. We'll protect the forest. That's not the way. That's the reasons why it's the tribal land is being. Especially the changes that have been brought in the environment impact. So there's huge coal fields, massive coal mines are there. It's literally what they call black diamond. Now, if you have the tribal states, if you empower the tribals, then a fair amount of kitty goes back and they also get democratically empowered. I'll tell you, Aarti, one very funny anecdote, and this comes from my participation in one of the movements in Kinnaur. Kinnaur is again a tribal land. Kinnaur is bordering China. It is part of Himachal Pradesh. In fact, you can say Kinnaur produces the best apple quality in India. Okay, so it's known for producing best. But also, Kinnaur is a place which has a population of just 90,000. Of course, massive area, huge area, but has a potential of generating, I think already some 70% is being harnessed, but of generating some 8,000 megawatt of hydroelectricity, just one district. Because Satluj flows there, Sapni, the n number of rivers, rivulets that flow. So you just imagine them construct a hydropower and that's how you can do it. So what has happened is that in that 8,000 megawatt, if you see, I mean, in monetary terms, it means 10,000 crores. Okay, 10,000 crores is what if you monetize this entire thing, and just now divide, even if they suppose we have to share a royalty of 10%, so 10,000 crores means 1,000 crores every year. So 1,000 crores means if you distribute that 1,000 crore into 80,000 people, say 20,000 families, just imagine the kind of money that we do if we empower. But we don't empower. What we do is we either privatize these hydropower, we either pass on these to National Hydropower Corporation, NDPC, and that's how we transfer the entire city to our national. At the same time, their local villages lose their identity. Nagpa village, where we had the Nagpa Chakri Hydropower Corporation, Nagpa village is gone. You know, we had to dislocate them, relocate them because of the hydropower generation, they lost the place, the geographical space. It got, because of the slides that we had to relocate them. Actually, that is the reality with the tribal. They have lots of assets, but they have been protecting those assets. And that's what I said, no? I mean, body and soul, nature is their body. That's how they've been protecting it, harnessing it in very limited numbers. The way this neoliberal capitalism does, I mean, it just squeezes whatever is left. So I think when you talk about tribal land, probably tribal people are the best adapted to reduce this conflict between nature. That's all. So I think that's it because I have to go now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Wonderful session. And really, we will definitely will bring you to our campus. Definitely.
Sure, so thank you so much. Yeah,
thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. May I now request Ms. Samita Sengupta, convener of WDC, to present the report of online training program to us. Over to you, Samita. Ma'am, you are mute.
Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good evening to all present over here. It's my immense pleasure to present report of 3 days online training program on gender disaster and sustainable communities conducted by WDEC of KES Shroff Degree College in collaboration with National Institute of Disaster Management, Government of India. The first day program was started with welcome address delivered by Aarti Gadre Madam, followed by Dr. Ajinder Walia Madam's discussion, where she gave importance on the advocacy of relief measures in a sensible manner. And here also women are able to reach on a higher position through their sacrifices, which is specifically pointed out. On first day, we had two eminent speakers, Dr. Lavanya Mashmaus, where discussion, in her discussion, she's very specifically talked about mitigation about all sorts of stratification related to resources, advantages, facilities among male and women population, which created hindrances in the growth of women's emancipation. Very strategically, she gave importance as how to build resilience among disaster affected women, because various studies show that during this disaster period, women are the most sufferers and exploitative people on the land and also on the earth. The second speaker of first day, Dr. Bhuti Patel, highlighted how to change the mindset, and there is a need on changing the mindset of patriarchal society where women are always the donors or providers, but males are always the takers. Vibhuti ma'am notably pointed out how to build interconnectivity between gender issues, sustainable development, as well as disaster relief measures, so that all measures have to be made accessible to disaster affected women and children. And for that, it is important to create awareness among women where the education can be used as an instrument, effective instrument to do that. On second day, we had also had two eminent speakers, Dr. Geeta Balkrishnan, where she shared about her college experience with relation to conducting various activities to disaster affected areas and also to disaster affected women and population, where she observed that there is very much gender equality persisting and prevailing among all those groups of people, male and women. And in all these situations, which she observed that all this stratification and differentiation is creating a difficult situation for women to live over there. On the second day, the second eminent speaker was Dr. Shangamit Shradhar Madam, where she very distinctly focused on gender responsive budget, featuring concept, preparation, structure, public spending, objectives, and its importance for women's empowerment while disseminating all this. And also she told that while framing the policy resolution, and she specifically opined that authority who would be assigned this kind of responsibility has to be maintained the duty and activities in a very, very accountable manner. Because while the discussion goes on preparing the gender budget, there we can see a very small amount of money is allocated for that. So that was a specific point of discussion. On third day, we had Ms. Sukriti Chauhan, where she specifically focused on that there is a need for feminist perspective, and also there is a need for intersectional approaches, because every time we can observe that there is a structural deprivation of women. And therefore, while structuring the policy resolution, we will have to take into account the social factors, which is very important while framing policy decision, because every aspect of life we can observe there is unequal power relations existing between male and female. Second point she was focusing, there was a pre-existing vulnerability among the women, where the women have to be made available at all center plans of decision-making process, whether it may be economical, it may be a political, it may be a social, it may be educational. Unless and until women are made into the focus, into the decision-making process, it will be difficult for the social upliftment and social improvement. And therefore, the social and cultural norms also have to be changed. And this mindset have to be prepared within the mind of every population. Thirdly, she spoke on impact on natural disaster, biologically, psychologically, socially, and also specifically she focused on post-disaster, the problematic situation. And during that particular period of the time, specifically the adolescent girls are facing traumatic situation, and it is difficult sometimes to provide a solution to all these kinds of existing problems which the people and the women and children are focusing on. And in relation to that, she presented various case studies of Indian societies along with the Kashmir, also tsunami also she presented, where she specifically focused on that the 80% of the women were the sufferers, and at that time they were dead during that period of time. And also she found out that there is a heightened gender gap existing in between male and female accessibility of all kinds of resources and the advantages. And therefore, the way forward is to know the depth of the problem. Priorities have to be given to the safety of the orphan people and the widows, ensuring post-disaster aid to all these extremely vulnerable people. And also there has to be very prominent integration of gender disaster management process, whereby there has to be continued access to healthcare facilities to help the women population with mental disabled people also. Lastly, Mr. Tikender Singh sir specifically focused on that environment as a national capital and connection to the quality of human life. Because he wants to speak on this, that man and environment are interrelated. The environment influences the life of human beings and also the human. The burning issues like environmental degradation, pollution, ecological imbalances, depletion of resources can be approached and solved only after considering the value judgment. Therefore, the interaction between the environment, the human society differs due to uneven distribution of natural resources, uneven economic and social development, dissimilarity of demographic factors, varying the viewpoints of the governments and individuals towards environment, etc. And also, he was talking about that there is a sustainable development, and this is the process of meeting human development goals specifically while sustaining the ability of the natural system to continue to provide the natural resources and ecosystem services upon which the economy and society entirely depended upon. As the concept developed, we can observe that it has shifted to focus more on economic development, social development, and environmental protection. So therefore, sustainable development is the organizing principle for sustaining finite resources necessarily to provide for the needs of the future generations of life on the planet, and therefore it is a process that envisions a desirable future state for human societies in which living conditions and also the resources continue to meet human needs without undermining the integrity, stability, and beauty of natural biotic system. And therefore, we can say that unless and until there is a significant measures are taken to incorporate environmental concern, also agricultural development, urban planning, technological innovations, industrial growth, and resources management, the situation is likely to worsen in the future. Therefore, the international efforts along with efforts at the grassroots level are required to achieve sustainable development. And therefore, for that, we need to think globally, act locally, which is the need of the hour today. Thank you. It's over to Aarti Madam.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. As all good things comes to an end, this online 3 days online program has come to an end. Now I'll request Dr. Vanita S. Simony, Chairperson of WDC, to propose formal vote of thanks. Over to you, ma'am.
Yes. Yes, Aarti. Good evening to one and all. I am Dr. Vanita Isaimani, Chairperson of Women Development and Empowerment Cell at KES Shroff College of Arts and Commerce. Our college is ranked India's 8th, Maharashtra's 2nd, and Mumbai's 2nd private higher education institution from Higher Education Grand Jury Ranking 21-22. Just a little housekeeping before I start the formal vote of thanks. The training was conducted by our college in association with National Institute of Disaster Management for 3 consecutive days from 15th July till today, that is 17th July 2021. We had almost 220 participants from different states and union territories like Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Nagaland, Karnataka, Rajasthan, Andhra Pradesh, Jharkhand, Bihar, Meghalaya, Tripura, Himachal Pradesh, Haryana, West Bengal, Delhi, Punjab, Odisha, Gujarat, Telangana, Assam, Jammu and Kashmir, and Chandigarh. We are now at the end of the juncture. I now formally propose the vote of thanks to all the contributors for this training program. Firstly, I would like to thank the constant support provided by Dr. Ajinder Wali, Assistant Professor at NIDM. Then I would like to thank the 6 resource persons of the program on disaster management, Dr. Lavanya Shanbhau, who spoke on gender equality, disaster management, and resilience, critical linkages. Dr. Vibhuti Patel, our mentor, who spoke on climate change impact with special reference to COVID-19. Dr. Geeta Balakrishnan, who threw light on mainstreaming gender in disaster risk reductions initiatives. Dr. Sangamitra Dhar, UN Women, who guided us on gender planning, policy making, budgeting, and auditing in disaster management context. Ms. Sukriti Chauhan, who highlighted on environment and sustainability in disaster context, eco-feminist perspective for disaster management. And Dr. Tikender sir on way forward for gender, climate action, and sustainability. I would also like to thank our management for their constant encouragement in conducting such events. Then I would like to thank our principal, Dr. Lily Bhushan Madam, who always maintained a professional demeanor throughout her tenure in our college. I would also like to thank our Vice Principal, Dr. V.S. Kannan, for his constant support in all possible ways for all events conducted by our college. Special thanks goes to Vaishali Oja for bringing in such wonderful speakers for the event, and Ms. Aarti Gadre for running this 3-day training program in a smooth manner without any glitches. I would also like to thank Ms. Samita Sengupta, convener of WDC, for such an excellent report about this 3-day training program. I also thank Ms. Jayashree Lokhande and Mr. Rajkumar Gupta, members of WDC, for helping us in many ways. My thanks also go to the participants, whom I'm sure of must have gained additional knowledge in the field of gender. A special thank goes to our volunteer, Dolu Mehta, for designing the flyer of this event. And lastly, I would like to thank Rashi and her team for social networking. Participants, you'll get your certificates after 15 days through the email that has been mentioned by you. Thank you all. Over to you, Aarti.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.